Welcome into today's webinar. I know everybody's familiar with the Zoom controls, but we still have them up there, so please take a quick look. Make sure that during the course of the webinar you're muted, and we're happy to have you keep your video on, especially if you have a beautiful background to show us. And our webinar today is entitled Geoheritage Elements to Enrich Earth and Space Science Teaching, brought to you by the NGSS ESS Working Group, core team, myself, Aida Awad, the past president of NAGT, Ed Robeck from the American Geosciences Institute, Missy Holzer from Nesta, and working the tech behind the scenes for us, Mitchell. Thank you for being here, Mitchell Bender Awalt. So we'll have 6 presenters on our webinar today. You can see them listed there, and we'll just do a brief intro at the beginning of the webinar. There will be some time for discussion at the end of the webinar. However, we do invite you to drop questions into the chat box throughout the course of the webinar. And please use that chat box as a chat also, not just for questions, but if things pop into your mind, ideas for implementation, just thoughts about what's happening with some of the slides, drop those into the chat box as well. We have a couple people who will be monitoring the chat for us, so we'd love to hear from you as we go through the slides. This is the last of our 2020-2021 webinar series. This was our 6th webinar series. We will begin our 7th webinar series in September. So we'll be taking a little break here over the summer as we prepare for next year's series. But of course, it's not too late to go back and look at some of our previous webinars. You'll find the archived versions of those webinars on the AGI YouTube channel. So please drop in there, look for the entire playlist. Great things to watch over the summer. Hope you enjoy those, and we'd love to hear feedback from you on those. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar, Geoheritage Elements to Enrich Earth and Space Science Teaching. And I'm going to turn things over to Ed to get us started. Ed.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I am Ed Robeck, Director of Education and Outreach at the American Geosciences Institute. My colleagues and I are here today, as Aida already pointed out, to share ideas about bringing dimensions of geoheritage and place-based education into K-12 instruction. And as our title indicates, we believe that these ideas can help educators enrich Earth and space science instruction by making explicit connections between the locations that are referenced in Earth and space science teaching and the experience of students in terms of the history, culture, and heritage of the communities where they live. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So these are the presenters. You'll be seeing each of us as we begin our presentations. Are we going to do an introduction, Aida? You had said something. Okay.
I don't think so. I think we're good.
It wasn't very good. All right, and we can go to the next slide then. So here's the webinar agenda very quickly. We'll be describing geoheritage, which is an emerging concept in the United States and is also very well established internationally, introducing major principles of place-based education, talking about how this can be implemented in practice. And we have some folks here who have been doing this, and so they'll be sharing some examples from practice and including some ways to do this virtually using a Google Earth project that we'll be sharing as well. So the idea is to support ways for you to get started using geoheritage in your classroom, and then thinking about what could be followed up with that. So thank you very much. And I think that now at this point, Eric is going to get us started with a poll. Eric?
Thank you, Ed. So we just want to get a sense of where you are. And so Mitch, if you could put the poll up. Please rate your comfort level with carrying out a science lesson with some level of geoheritage focus with your students, from basically, I don't know what you're talking about, but it sounds interesting, down to it really is a focal point of how I teach Earth science. So, and if you feel like you don't know a lot, join the crowd. This is in part why we are taking this effort. To really get this around. And we're also not finding a tremendous amount of literature suggesting that it's much is being done with geoheritage in K-12 settings. So I'll give you a couple more seconds here. Okay, so right now it looks like there's a slight level of awareness here, just a little, about this, but some people, it's a completely new concept. and others a smaller majority as well. I think we could get going along here. So really, you know, we have a good starting point. We're not starting from scratch. So with this, I'll turn it over to Missy, who could get into the real meat here.
Thank you, Eric. Let's start off with a couple definitions here. We can look at geoheritage through three different lenses. The first one, scientifically and educationally significant geoheritage sites include those with textbook geologic features and landscapes, distinctive rock or mineral types, unique or unusual fossils, or other geologic characteristics that are significant to education and research. Let's try a different lens. This one, culturally significant geoheritage sites are places where geologic features or landscapes played a role in cultural historical events. Let's try a third lens. Aesthetically significant geoheritage sites include landscapes that are visually appealing because of their geologic features or processes. Many geologic sites are tourist destinations that provide local and regional economic benefits. Let's take a deeper dive. Next slide, please. So human history is connected to local geologic landscapes and resources, and geologic heritage is an integral part of cultural identities around the world. Here in the US and abroad, we have been working to preserve these geologically significant locations for generations to come, whether through national or state or local efforts. We all have an opportunity to connect with these places. What about connecting our students? So textbook authors and publishers and others have pulled images of these locations for definitional purposes with little regard to historical context and connecting humans to a location. It's up to us to connect our students, and in this webinar, we'll provide instructional ideas to facilitate the incorporation of geologic heritage sites into our classes. So we have a shared definition of geoheritage. Let us review a definition. America's geologic heritage arises from the features, landforms, and landscape characteristics of the United States, which are conserved in consideration of a full range of values that society places on them, so that their lessons and beauty will remain as a legacy for future generations. Please note that we will be providing a resource list for this workshop, including a link to a wonderful document targeting America's geoheritage, written as a collaboration between American Geosciences Institute and the National Park Service. As mentioned, geoheritage is a global concept, however, it may exist in slightly different names around the world. Next slide, please. To help us contextualize geoheritage, let's look at the big ideas outlined in the America's Geoheritage pamphlet. While doing so, please consider a place you believe has geologic significance. These are the 5 big ideas for geoheritage, and will help us have a starting place with our students. Landscapes are an integral part of our history and cultural identity, and we have a proud tradition of exploring and preserving our geoheritage. It's shaped by geologic processes over billions of years, is diverse and extensive. It holds abundant values, all of those that are listed there. Benefits from establishing conservation methods developed around the world and within the United States, and engages many communities, including yours. So I want you to be even thinking about your local geoheritage. And involvement will ensure its conservation in future generations. Now, there are similarities between what you know as place-based education and geoheritage in education, and both they seek out to connect students with the local heritage. Next, Aida will expand upon the connections between geoheritage education and place-based education. Aida?
Thanks very much, Missy. So I want to get us just a little bit grounded here in the idea of place. So we all have senses of places and a sense of each place, but let's think about a specific place. So I'm going to ask you in just a minute to close your eyes. I'm going to count us down for about 10 seconds. And what I'm going to ask you to do is think of a place that has a really deep meaning for you. Okay, so think of a place. I'm going to count you down 10 seconds. So go ahead, think of that place that has a really deep meaning for you. Okay, if you were going to draw that place, what would you draw? What would you include in a drawing that would demonstrate how that place is important to you? What would you include that shows the meaning of that place? So we're going to try something that's kind of fun. We're going to try a waterfall chat in just a moment. So let me explain what a waterfall chat is. in a waterfall chat, you're going to type into the chat box the name of the place and just a couple of words about why it's meaningful to you, but don't hit submit. So I will count us down and we will all hit submit at the same time, and we'll see a cascading waterfall of all of the place names. So you've got your place in mind. Go ahead and type it in, but don't hit submit. I'll give you a second to type. Couple of words about why it's important. Okay, everybody ready? All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Submit. Woo, there they go. Okay. I'm seeing Lake Superior, I'm seeing Yellowstone, Great Smoky Mountains, Enchanted Rock in Texas exposes time. Darwin Bay and Galapagos, the most beautiful place in the world. Okay. Memories with my grandmother. So I'm seeing lots of sediments, fresh water, a gathering place. I'm seeing lots of wide variety of places, but also a wide variety of words describing what meaning those places have to us. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of those. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, Silver Island, the air, rock, and water feel so good. And Wendy, thanks for sharing emotive. Yep. All right. Great. Thank you all for dropping those in. And I think when we look at that list, we really get a sense of this tension here. When I think about my classroom and when I'm preparing for lessons with students, where are the insertion points for these kinds of activities, for bringing a sense of place, the importance of place forward? So of course, we've got the iconic locations that are shown in our textbooks. Shiprock, New Mexico, seen here, is one of those places. But then we also have local sites that we would like to be able to focus in on for a variety of reasons. So how do you deal with that tension between the iconic sites? We'll see one of those in a little bit, and those local sites. We're going to hear more about those in just a few minutes. So I'm going to turn it back over to Eric, who's going to take us maybe a little bit of a different direction, and then we'll jump back to thinking about local sites and iconic sites specifically. Eric, all yours.
Thank you, Ada. So, we've given you some broad definitions and some great framework for what we're talking about. But, if we want to see this expressed in classrooms, one of the fundamental questions that we have to answer for a teacher is, how is this any better than what they're doing right now? Particularly now when you get so many directives coming at you and it's a bit of shifting sand. I think we'll all be glad when we get through this year. But what about next year? Well, when we look at geoheritage, there's a real value added that comes into this in the sense that in terms of the curriculum, the prospect of representing cross-cutting concepts such as pattern systems, stability, and change, which we'll talk about a little bit more in just a second, these are all attainable. But what's more important, perhaps, for students is these local sites foster a personalized sense of place. Now, this is important for middle school students who are trying to figure out just exactly who they are. They know who they are, but where is that person? And high school students are now venturing out into the community, really, and recognizing that they can contribute to that history. When we look at phenomena, Earth phenomena are complex by their nature and often span beyond the human lifetimes. So many aspects are subtle, while others are all too obvious. But really showing students or engaging them in the social and historical aspects enhance the importance of that site and helping them to understand our relationship with the Earth. They're also interdisciplinary. Connections to history, civics, economics, these are easily approached, and opportunities to interact with the literature and mathematics curricula stand out as well. The arts curriculum also offers particular promise, forming, and really we can look at these geoheritage sites as forming the basis for cross-cutting, cross-disciplinary projects that provide the means by which students can express their engagement with the community. Next slide. So by now, hopefully, you're at least, we shouldn't have to do a poll on NGSS, but there are cross-cutting concepts, which for me and how I represent it with my students are, they are the so whats. How do we connect these things together? And so really, we can come up with some meaningful relationships here. For example, a high school performance expectation states, analyze geoscience data to make the claim that one change can create feedbacks that cause changes to other Earth systems. This is cause and effect. And really, we can look at both the natural and human forces for a particular location, or really how those same properties can keep that location stable. We can also look at upper elementary grades as analyzing, interpret data from maps to describe patterns. What's the pattern that's represented by a particular place, and what makes that particularly significant? And so with that, I believe we have an example coming up, and I'll turn it over to Erica.
Thank you so much, Eric. Yeah, I'm Erica. I'm tuning in from the Keweenaw Peninsula today, where we've been doing significant work on informal education with Geoheritage, but more recently working with many community partners to engage K-12 classrooms as well. So just want to share a few examples and activities of some of the things that we've been doing. And Eric did a really nice job explaining how Geoheritage can add value to earth science instruction. And how that relates to those cross-cutting principles. So we're going to introduce an activity that encourages exploration of place. And I think what's really important when we're thinking about geoheritage is our real geology, because we clearly have a relationship. Maybe we don't know how to articulate that necessarily, but we feel that as these themes keep coming up, that sense of place, that identity in that. And so, with the Geoheritage, we have this opportunity to explore not only those interconnecting systems, but it's a way of seeing how geology really sets the stage for a place, its economy, its culture, the values that people hold, the politics of an area. It can all be kind of rooted in the geology of that place and our sense of place. So we're going to do a little activity here, and I believe we've got this up on the screen here. Everybody should have an opportunity to click on this link and explore the 360 drone image. We're whisking you away to Eagle Harbor, Michigan, which is on Lake Superior. So just take a moment and have a look around there, and we'll come back and talk about this in just a moment.
Yeah, and if you don't go to the link, it should be playing on the screen share link, so you can see as it's rotating around. I think we've been around a full turn, Erica.
Okay. Is it? Yeah, it's not moving on my screen, but we can put the link in the chat as well, and people can explore it on their own screens. Okay, and also what we'll do now that everyone has had an opportunity to look through and have a look at this amazing drone image. If we can put the chat or the Jamboard link in the chat, and we're going to do a little activity based on you having a few minutes to look at this place. So you're just basically being dumped into this environment, and not. Some of us might have been in this place. I know a few people on the call have, but this is an opportunity to have a look at this in a virtual sense. And then we're going to go to the Jamboard, and we're going to work on an activity together using that platform. Wait to see everybody's joining in here on the Jamboard. And the first thing you'll see will be just this image of North America. What we'd like to do, if you're not familiar with Jamboard and how to use this, we'll be using two tools. We'll be using the sticky note, which you can find all these tools on the left-hand side of the board. So if you take a sticky note and just type in where you are today, where you're zooming in from, and then post that onto the page, hit cancel, and you can drag these around, and then take the pen option, which is at the very top of those, the very top of the toolbar. And you can actually connect your sticky note to where you are on the map here. So it's also a fun activity if you're working with groups virtually to be able to see where everybody's coming in from, and it also develops our sense of place for our group. Where is everybody located? You can change the color of the pen as well. If you're not seeing that show up, you can change it to red or something else, so it'll be more visible. This is great. I like seeing how this. All right. There's some people in the Midwest. So we've got a pretty great geographical distribution of place and where we're coming in from. And looks like everyone's oriented. We know what we're doing here with the Jamboard. So if we could advance at the top of the frame, you'll see that you can advance to the next slide. So if you want to, once you get your things established on the map, click to the second slide, and we're going to see a still of the 360 panorama that we just looked at. And the first, you should see the question, how does this place make you feel? So just to take a moment and think about, what is it about this place? How does this make you feel? And then use that post-it note to add to the Jamboard. We'll just take a few seconds to go through that. Wow, these are some really great responses, seeing what's coming in. I'm sure everyone else is looking at these as well. But so essentially, these activities, these next few slides that we're exploring, were part of a module we developed that was to develop local literacy for students in our region. And what I love about this kind of activity is that we're all going to have a different response, and to be able to share those out and be able to see that the place itself has different values for people, and that's what helps develop sort of our sense of place. And by exploring how a place makes you feel, you're getting in touch with that emotional connection to the place, which allows for deeper learning, and perhaps if you're in that area, this is your local site, a sense of stewardship for that site as well. So this is a really great exercise to do that. And if you were doing this in a classroom setting, you could sort of group these and see which ones are similar. But I think we'll move to the next slide, which is the third frame here. And the next question is, what are you curious about? So as you were working on that 360 and looking at those things, what things stood out to you? What was something that you became curious about when you first saw this place? So we'll take a few seconds there. Can tell we're in a geo crowd here. I'm loving all these responses. I want to know what the rocks are. What's going on? Is it glacial? What's happening? Yeah, these are really great responses. And again, you could do this where you sort of looking at some of the similar responses and how people have different things that stand out to them. And I think that what would be, in some instances, you might see that people are more interested in the lighthouse. They may be more interested in how old the lighthouse is, who built that, who's living in this area. We're kind of a geo crowd, so I'm seeing lots of people are like, what are those fingers? What's going on? And so as Eric was pointing out earlier, this is another opportunity to look at like patterns and other things that emerge, and to look at how these little fingers of rock, which are, we'll talk about that after the next slide, what these things actually are. We'll reveal where we are. But yeah, just to look at that interconnectedness between why we have a lighthouse sitting here and the landscape itself. So we'll go now to the next, to our last frame. And And this is something that if you were doing this in a classroom setting, you might want to take a little bit more time. We're just going to take a few minutes to look at this, but looking at what are the natural systems and what are the human generated parts of our place. And essentially the driving question is like, why is there a lighthouse? Why do we need this lighthouse here? So the geoheritage, the underpinning geology, these reefs and ridges being the reason why we have this lighthouse that then brings that cultural aspect to this site and that aesthetic aspect to this site. So just take a moment and look at some of those responses. It'd be bad to get your boat in from here. And so I think when we were looking to how far do the rocks go up between the water. So the previous slide, there were some responses, and a lot of these things were really looking at those natural elements of the place, and then also looking at that human angle. If we're looking, I look at the interacting systems here, I think this is an amazing spot to look at, and someone else had pointed out on the last slide, erosional forces. So you're looking at that interaction between the lake and then the landscape in itself. And the site that we're looking at is a great geosite because it has scientific value and educational value. It teaches us about 1 billion-year-old lava flows that were associated with a mid-continental rift event. And so these fingers, the mysteries revealed, if we're looking at these points are actually the lava flow bottoms. And then the bays are the lava flow tops that were eroded away. So that, again, that interacting systems between the lake and then the water or the rock itself. But you get these really, really cool patterns. And a lot of people might walk past that and not realize the significance of this place in a scientific sense. It also has that cultural aspect, having the lighthouse located there. This was an area that was a huge copper mining operation. So there were many ships going by here. So having this lighthouse was a significant part of safe passage for people in this place. And now as part of a conservation effort as well to share this history, but also this geoheritage with our community. So I think that by doing these kind of activities, it really helps to empower people to read landscapes in a more thoughtful way, because you're not just saying, well, here's a lighthouse. You're like, well, why is the lighthouse there? And you're able to make connections between these interconnecting systems if we take the time to explore them in a little bit deeper way. And it also helps with these big ideas that the landscape and human activity in any place are really directly linked to the geology, and that we have this relationship with geology. And in a few minutes, Jennifer Lynn is going to share a classroom activity that looks exactly at that, working with students to connect these interconnected systems in their own classrooms and exploring these things together. So I will hand it over to Aida. Thank you for your responses, everyone. This has been really fun.
I'm going to try to get it to cooperate with me here so I can come back. Okay. Can you see my screen again?
We're still on the lighthouse.
Are we in the Grand Canyon now? Okay, thanks. We've moved just a little bit to the south and west. So before we go to Jennifer and hear about her work with students in the classroom, I want to just take a step back and get us set up for thinking about the design elements of place-based education. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to really start to build an understanding of how the tenets of place-based education can support the integration of geoheritage into the classroom lessons. So these next couple of slides come from the work of Dr. Steve Semken. And Steve's a professor of geology and education at Arizona State University. And as we start to think more deeply about place-based education, I'd like you to think about a place that you often see pictured in your textbook for your class. So place-based education is teaching and learning that is situated in place. It is through the natural and the cultural attributes of the place that meaning and relevance are developed for those engaging in the experience. And in a minute, we're going to look more closely at what we mean by natural and cultural attributes. But before we do, I'd like us to consider these two quotes that Dr. Semken uses to really ground the importance of place-based education. First, there's a quote from Greg Smith, who said, "Place-based education is what happened before schools were created." He also stated that place-based education is a new, old way of teaching. And then Dudley Patterson, who was an Apache elder, who said, "Wisdom sits in places." And in fact, I've heard Dr. Semken follow up that quote with another saying that you have to know places intimately to drink of their wisdom. Really interesting quote. So on this slide, we can see that our connection to places influences how we teach and how we learn about them. In fact, knowledge that we gain about places becomes part of the meaningfulness that we attribute to those places, and it contributes to placemaking and to a sense of place. In other words, we learn from and we feel for the places that have meaning for us. So I think the 5 design elements shown here really describe this. First, we're going to start with the pinky finger over here on the left side. We're going to focus on the content of the natural attributes of the place. So think for a moment about the natural attributes of a place from your textbook. What content does it bring to mind? In other words, what are the science connections or the standards that can be taught through that place? Next, on the ring finger, what are the cultural attributes of the place? They're the ones that add context and relevance for us and for our students. And third, we can teach in a place, or we can teach in ways that suggest the place. These might be through a virtual tour, like the one we're going to see in a few minutes. They could be a tour that includes maps and artifacts and videos, links to activities, questions that engage students, even sounds and color schemes like the color scheme that you see here that really evoke a sense of the place. And then at the index finger, teaching ideas that promote thinking and actions that encourage sustainability and resilience for that place. And these attributes can lead to a desire to conserve the place. And finally, we can encourage and guide people to form their own intellectual and emotional connections to the place as they develop a sense of place. So these are the 5 design elements that we can keep in mind as we're building lessons that have a geoheritage focus to bring into our classroom. So now I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer, and I'm going to stop sharing. I think she's going to share her screen. Is that right, Jennifer?
Yes, I am.
Great,
And hopefully
great.
this will work well. Share screen. Okay, first thing
Right.
are you seeing children?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to be sharing, and I'm not sure, I'm hoping the audio from this screen works when it's just a small video clip. So I'll give you a little bit of what happened before this video clip. I took a summer workshop. I don't know, it was like a day-long workshop on how to take students on virtual tours using Expedition, Google Expedition. And then they had another extension for teachers that might want to design their own virtual tours. And there was a little stipend involved. That didn't hurt. And to work with different partners to do that. So I was like, okay. And I'm not the most tech savvy person. I definitely need to have the training as we go, and we have those resources here with our REMC, partnering with Michigan Tech and LSSI. So we have a great network up here to do that. So I jumped in, and that was the summer before last summer, and started planning this project. And where it seemed to fit best was actually in my earth and space science areas. And one of the things that we studied, I was teaching 5th grade at the time, and we cover Earth systems and the interactions of Earth systems: biosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere. So I thought that might be a good project to start with. So I borrowed the 360 camera. I went out and I took pictures of different sites that were important around here. I'm in the Upper Peninsula on Lake Superior in Baraga County. So I took some pictures around the county and around the town. Most of them ended up around the town. We'll see that in a bit. So in preparation to for the students to do a science and writing project. I was contained classroom, so I could integrate really well between two subject areas. I borrowed the VR equipment so they could have a VR experience and then be able to see the pictures I took of our area in VR. So this is them on a virtual field trip in a rainforest. And it's only a really short clip, but it's just to get that sense of excitement that they had. Okay, so that was them in the rainforest turning around and seeing a gorilla that like literally scared them, and they were jumping out of their skin there with that. So pretty excited. But then the night of this video clip, we got I saw a news release 10 o'clock that night of this saying that tomorrow's your last day in school. Everybody's going home because of COVID. So the next day was my last day with the students, and we had our VR equipment, and we went in on a virtual field trip of what viruses are. And I said, okay, you guys, we're going to have extra long spring break. We'll see you in a few weeks. I didn't get to see him in a few weeks. I still get a little choked up when I think about it. Erica was one of my partners, so she was with me through that journey. So we did see each other in a few weeks, but we saw each other online for the rest of the school year. But I had this great resource. I had these great, this material. I said, we're still going to do this project, but we're going to do it. We're going to do virtual reality virtually. And Erica came in as a guest speaker into our Google Meets. We didn't know how to I didn't know how to do Google Classroom. I mean, I'm a different person now. I'm not sure if it's all in good ways. And so we did, and I'm going to pull up what we ended up with, and we shifted it from writing into from science. So they knew the Earth system stuff, and then they had a small writing assignment to put on our tour. I need to find where I put my tour. I think I need to minimize the screen. You'd think I'd be more fluent by now, right? Here we go. Okay, so here's our tour, and this is at scene 1. And this is Bishop Baraga. So let's see, I need to find a spot here. Okay, so if you've done these, you click on the eye, and then the writing pops up. So there's an intro that I helped, and I just took info from our local tourist group, our tourism center, that tells where the location is, how to actually get there. And then each student had their own heading. It takes a while to go through this whole thing, so I'm just going to kind of show you the site and give you some of the headings that each student, kind of jigsawed it. So every student had a part of the big puzzle. So the first site introduced the different Earth systems: atmosphere, hydrosphere, geosphere, biosphere. And then a student wrote about Bishop Baraga, was very, and a student whose mom was totally into it, totally involved in it. They're members of our local tribe. So it brings in that whole history of language and the intersection of European and our tribal folks here. This is Point Abbey. Let me get there. Okay. And talked about rocks and water, seiches, what lake breezes are, the Keweenaw Bay. This would be the fishery, the tribe's fishery, and how lake effect snow is formed. Mouth of the Huron. And here we also inserted a picture of alluvium. So we're atmosphere, walleye fishing, alluvium. So we have a picture of the mouth of the bay and that delta being formed. And these are all places that our students, as we were talking, most of them have been to most of these places. But again, it's getting them into that seeing of, you know, looking at things in a new way, and having to communicate that and to put it into words. And that, you know, of course, goes in with, you know, many content areas. Okay, now we're at a river and talking about the steelhead run, riffles in the river, the water cycle. Another river where there's erosion, lichens eroding rocks, a mixed forest. We're back up at the Bishop Erica Shrine. Transpiration, talking about our local lake trout festival. And then here at the head of the bay, gathering beach glass, waterfowl, and then the red rocks, which is, I'll show you that. And when I was out taking pictures, this was, there was a family out here, and actually it was one of the students in the class. So I was like, is it okay if you guys are in our virtual tour project? So this is our grandmother, auntie, and one of our students here. And our red rocks, anybody who comes through Lance, red rocks are here, and then that Bishop Erica Shrine is right up here. So, so that was our project. And I talked to the students. Since this time I was reassigned to middle school science. So I was their 5th grade science teacher. Now I'm their 6th grade science teacher. And as far as I know, I'll be their 7th grade science teacher next year. So as far as extensions and building on this, I told them I was going to be talking to you guys today. And I said, okay, what are your ideas? What do you want to do next year? Or when we kind of loop back to these same concepts. And so we talked about doing the seasons, looking at those changes and going back to like cross-cutting concepts. You know, we've already used this for systems and modeling, but we could do seasons and look at change, maybe patterns. They also are interested in doing things closer to the school and the schoolyard and the building. So they're interested in that. They're also super interested in actually seeing it in VR, because we have not seen our project in VR yet, due to our COVID protocols with you know, our safety protocols. We are live at school, but you know, passing equipment from face to face, and just really a good idea. So so that's, I guess, what I have from here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen here. How do I stop sharing my screen?
Should be at the very top.
Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. Okay, I'm not sure where I am in my time frame. I know this is a really tight timeline. So that was the example. Are there maybe any questions on that project? Or then I did also, one of the things we're doing right now that I think fits that theme is we are starting our plant unit, but we're doing it with, we're doing it with a set of essays by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she wrote a book, Gathering Moss, which are actually personal essays covering the natural and cultural history of mosses. So she covers it from all of the biology and the science, but she's also Potawatomi, and she incorporates her indigenous ways of knowing, which is important for our students in this community. It's a Ojibwa tribe. However, there are a lot of language and cultural ties with the Potawatomi people.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was wonderful. So we're going to take a jump now from the very local to the iconic. And I think if we think about our textbooks, we've all seen Mount St. Helens in our textbook in one section or another, or maybe in multiple sections. So I'm going to go through this very, very quickly. I will drop the link to this in the chat later on, and you will also be able to find it on our resource handout, which we'll give you access to at the end of this webinar, so that you can come back and look at it in much more detail. But I'm going to go through it very quickly just because of time. So in keeping with the theme of names, here we have an indigenous name for Mount St. Helens, and it did have two that I've found so far. One is Luit and the other one is Luala Cloch. And we can see the story here embedded in this Google Earth project about how Mount St. Helens got its name. But we can also think about this particular iconic geoheritage site in terms of different views of it. So here's a very modernistic, almost impressionistic piece of artwork, and here's an older piece that shows it in its glory prior to the 1980 eruption. Maybe you like to think about a fine arts example of using the ash from Mount St. Helens to make a beautiful piece of glass artwork. Of course, we know that it has a different name than that indigenous name. It's Mount St. Helens. The name was given to it by Captain George Vancouver as he sailed along the coastline and saw the mountain sticking up the Columbia River Gorge. And this is what it might look like if you were looking at it from the city currently. And again, I apologize for going through this very quickly, but you'll notice in some of these information cards along the side of this Google Earth project that there's a great opportunity for students to come back now and think about the name of their own local place. And maybe they think it should have a different name, and they could give some reasons for that. It's always interesting for students to think about where these iconic sites that are pictured in their textbooks are, and if they were going to go visit them, how might they get there? And why might they take that method of transportation? In particular, for Mount St. Helens, we know that it's part of the Cascade Range. And so this scene in the Google Earth project invites students to go out to Concord Consortium's Seismic Explorer. And there's an activity linked here there where they can go through the Seismic Explorer and look at why those volcanoes are where they are. And of course, we haven't yet stepped foot at the foot of this volcano. So within Google Earth projects, you can drop into photospheres, you can upload your own photospheres, and you can really have a nice immersive three-dimensional experience of walking around that particular area. So here we can see the mountains of ash at the base of the mountain. We can look off in the distance here and see Spirit Lake. We can zoom into it if we'd like, or come back out. So we have an opportunity to do all of that. And as well, we have other views such as a topographic map view that we might see in a lab manual. We can take a look at videos right here within a Google Earth project. So lots of opportunities to really bring the sense of this place, this iconic place, forward as we're thinking about building this into a lesson. I'm going to stop there. I'll invite you to go back and look at that. We'll drop the link in again, as I said at the end. But I'm going to step aside here and let Eric pick up on some more NGSS connections. Eric.
Thank you, Aida. So really, we have to keep coming back to the curriculum, going back to what our curriculum sources are. But one of the things that is really unique and a real opportunity for us is that geoheritage itself is a particularly uniquely human concept. And if you look at any of the ESS 3 performance expectations, Earth and Space Science 3, these are all about humanity's relationship with the Earth and how one affects the other. And so really, if you ignore this, it comes at your personal peril. But really, the outcome should be, what is our relationship with the Earth? Now to wrap this up, next slide, please. We have a second poll, a concluding poll. And Mitch, if you could put that up. And then it's really, okay, so what sorts of coalition network resources do you currently have available for you to check this work and to start this work? And please check all of these that apply to you. Okay, so we've got, I know there's a lot to read there. So we've got shifting from a lot of solo work, but also really knowing how you can start to build a team, how you can begin to connect to the local community and some local agencies, state or regional organizations. Sometimes they are just looking for these opportunities to help you and they don't know how to start. but there also seems to be a lot of you that know where there are online resources that you can access. And so you can share those with us, or you certainly look to the resource sheet that we're going to share as well. Okay, go ahead and close that. And I will turn this back over to Aida to close us out.
Thanks very much, Eric. So we're hoping that you're as excited about this work as we are, and we'd love to have you join us in this work moving forward. We're not quite sure what that means yet, but we would love to be able to keep in touch with you. So please, I just dropped the link here in the chat box. Please go ahead and drop your name and your email address into that form, and we will keep you posted on where we're going next and how you can get in touch with us. We would love to have you join us. So I'm going to give you a second to do that. Grab that link. And then at the same time, I'm going to put the link in the chat box here to our resources handout. Let's see if that's the right one. Okay. On the resources handout, you will also have access to these slides and to all of the other pieces that we showed you today. So the resources handout will get you back in touch with all of us. Our contact information is on the slides as well as on that handout itself. So please do join us there. I think we have just a couple of minutes for questions. Missy, did you have some questions that maybe had been dropped into the chat? We've got about, maybe 3 or 4 minutes for 3 minutes for questions.
Well, not questions that have been dropped into the chat, and so feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. But I do have a couple, as a thought for anybody that's on the panel today. How do I get started with Geoheritage with high school students? What are your suggestions?
I can speak to that. We have a colleague who we have been working with, Himalatha Bhaskaran, here in Salisbury, Maryland, who has her students start with a place in town that's special to them, that they find somehow appealing, and then they build projects out from that. They go ahead and they start to find out how it was named, and how it relates to the history of town and different things, and they build projects out of that, and then she ripples out from that to other places, both locally and regionally. And we've seen some of her work, and it's quite impressive what the students do. But starting with something that's familiar to them, she used an example of a coffee shop, for example, that a lot of the students frequent after school, and they go from there. So that's one way.
I could also add that just about every high school student has a phone with a camera in it, and just merely asking them to do a photo essay. Come up with a concept. You get some really good technical sort of things, and then you can also get some very artistic works coming out of it. But do a photo essay built around some particular site, maybe this type of site that Ed has mentioned. Where's it come from? Why is it there? Why is it called that? So on.
I think another, I'll just speak to part of the project that Jennifer just presented on, really being rooted in partnerships. So in our region, we're going after NASA space grants that are a collaboration between the MySTEM network, our Lake Superior Stewardship Initiative, the Regional Education Media Center, and then our local schools. And so having that partnership to support a project like Jennifer's, and we've had those projects have been done at the 8th grade level, at the high school level, and each project has their own sort of, like you say, what is my place, what is significant here, and how can I make this really cool digital resource that I can share with my community. So I think it's also that recognizing that we need to have that partnership in place too, and to find the funding for those things. So.
We have thank you so much. We have a question from Rondi Davies, and she is asking, any advice for initiating projects for students that live in an urban setting?
That's a great question. I'm just going to bring up a quick thing that I was doing. So I taught in suburban Chicago, but one of the things that my students really enjoyed doing was our annual field trip to look at the architectural stone that was used in buildings in Chicago itself. And so we did go down often, and of course they love to take pictures of themselves in front of those fabulous buildings, but it was also an opportunity for them to go back and do some research about where that stone came from why it was where it was and the stories of those places. So in a way, we took what was very local to that urban Chicago Loop area, and we made it a global exploration through that. So that was one way that we did it. Love to hear it from others.
I also see Emily Gotchis just put a note in the chat about earth caches. And Emily's been doing a lot of work with teachers and earth caches in our region. And this is another way to connect, like you say, to whether it's a building or a hidden, you know, boulder that's somewhere, or a boulder garden, an ex situ example of things. Building boulder gardens in your schoolyards in an urban setting would also be another way to work with, you get your kids developing those kind of projects, but bringing the rocks to your space as well. So those are some other examples.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing those. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap things up here. I do want to just mention that there is an associated workshop upcoming at the Earth Educators Rendezvous. You can still register for it, but only through maybe the end of the day tomorrow. We're still looking for a couple of other participants in it. The workshop is entitled Preparing for Student Creation of Virtual Contexts for Exploring Geoscience Environments, and we will touch on geoheritage in the workshop. Ed Roebuck and I are 2 of the 5 conveners, so we'd love to have you join us for that. Please check out the Earth Educator Rendezvous website for the full program. Also, as I mentioned before, this is the last of our webinars for the 2020-2021 webinar series. Our next series, 2021-2022, Series 7, will begin in September. Over the summer, we invite you to visit the AGI YouTube channel, where you'll find archived versions of all of the webinars. If you would like a certificate of participation, you do need to fill out the post-webinar survey. And even if you don't want that certificate, we'd love to have you fill out the survey. It's a great opportunity for you to share some of your thoughts about our webinars with us. Please do go to the link here, and thank you, Mitchell, for dropping that into the chat box. As you, I think, know, this webinar series is brought to you by the 3 organizations, NAGT, NESTA, and AGI. NAGT has a full series of webinars. There is a webinar, at least 1 a week. So please drop onto the NAGT webinar page. Join us as a member of NAGT. We'd love to have you. I'm going to turn it over to Missy to talk about NESTA. Missy.
Well, NESTA, National Earth Science Teachers Association, is a K-12 earth science educator community. Please feel free to join us. We have a social media presence, a quarterly journal, e-news, flagship website is Windows to the Universe. We welcome all members.
And Ed, AGI.
Yes, thanks everybody for being with us today and helping us to extend and explore this important work. AGI is a federation of societies related to all things Earth and space science, and we do a lot in education. Many of you may know our flagship outreach program, which is Earth Science Week, but we also have other resources available, and I invite you to visit our website and find those, especially the Education GeoSource database, which has a lot of resources that you can make use of in your instruction. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much to everybody for joining us. I think we're going to be able to capture the chat too. So I want to thank everyone for participating in the chat as well. I know there were a lot of important resources dropped in there, and we'll see if we can make that available on the webinar page as well. This webinar will be up on the AGI page in an archived version very shortly, probably by the beginning of next week. So thank you to Mitchell for helping us out behind the scenes. We very much appreciate your help. And thank you to all of those who presented on the webinar today, especially to my colleagues, Missy and Ed, for another great year of the webinar series. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your afternoon.